All right, I think we'll get going. I think there's a couple more people still trickling in, but in the interest of time, let's kick off. So, welcome back everyone to the monthly sync. Today's webinar is all about where do I start when it comes to building a scaled motion? Really topical for loads of CS leaders. Lots of us out there wanting to start this, but really don't know where to begin. And so that's what we're unpacking today. If you're new to this webinar, I'm Tash, VP of Customer Growth at Hook, and we're hosts of this webinar. And I'm joined today by the amazing Courtney from Clio. Courtney, would you tell us a little bit about you and the part of the business that you run at Clio?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. My name's Courtney. I am Senior Manager of Scaled Customer Programs at Clio. I lead our scaled and our digital customer success strategies. So I sit within our larger customer success organization, and I work directly with our account management team to run our scaled motions, and then also help partner with all of our other functions to build out our digital led motions as well. I've been at Clio for about a year and a half now, so still fairly new, but have been in scaled and digital in those programs in particular for about the last 5 years at companies like ActiveCampaign and ClickUp. And I've been in customer success leading teams since too long, 2016, so 10 years now.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining us. We have about 30 minutes today, just under. So we are cramming it full of good content to the point where when Courtney and I briefed for this, we ended up actually cutting everything we wanted to say in half and thinking we could have two different webinars because there's so much good stuff to talk about. So we're going to get through as much as we can today. Of course, you might have questions and we want you to ask questions. So if you do, please post them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll try and save some time at the end and get through as many of them as we can. All right, let's start right at the beginning. Lots of folks want to build a scaled CS motion. What does that actually mean? And how do you know it's time to start thinking about this as a CS org?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's always time to start thinking about it. So I think if it's on your mind, then you should definitely put into practice or put into place your first pilot, your first test, the motions to start to build a business case around this because it's an important topic and it's always something that's going to come up in leadership of, how do we do more with less? How do we venture into this new digital age of AI, et cetera. So there's always going to be some sort of compounding external factors and internal pressure to increase our reach and our influence with our customers. And so it's always a good time. What I would say in sort of getting started is maybe don't think so much about fitting into a certain very specific definition or type of scaled success motion, comparing it yourself to your peers or what others are doing in the industry, because really it's going to be very specific to your teams, to your business, to your setup, your product, your customers. And really, it's about finding what works for you and how to pick an area of focus to start with so that you can prove value back to leadership and back into the business. So I think that's the first thing to think about when starting to build is don't get too hung up on a certain way to do it. Don't let that be a blocker. You don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have, you don't have to have all the right components. Start small, figure out where you can have the most influence, and then work through how you start to build that out. And sorry, I know this is a really long answer, but
Yeah.
I'll give you sort of my five kind of components or pillars that I use, not only to start like kind of thinking about building and testing a scaled motion, but even in my day-to-day practice, continuing to launch new programs or think about how we like move into new segments within our business. Because at the end of the day, scaled is really about one thing. It is about increasing your reach and your influence with your customers and delivering specific outcomes, right? And ideally, that reach and that influence, it needs to be repeatable, it needs to be automated. If you have one-to-one resources, it needs to free up those one-to-one resources to have the most high impact strategic conversations and intervene at the right time. And so we think about this in like five pillars to sort of get us started. And then also these become questions to help you build out your program. And the first one is segmentation first design. I think one place where leaders can get really hung up on is scaled usually gets bucketed into, oh, it's everything that's not CSM owned, or it's everything below a specific, ARR. And I would encourage you to abandon those segments. Those are not really segments. And really think down into what is a specific cohort with a problem that you can solve that is meaningful to your business, that you can have hopefully the quickest amount of impact within, I'd say, like a 3 to 6 month time period. So, segmentation first, get really narrow in your focus so that you know exactly who you're targeting and you have a very specific, action and outcome to drive that. And I'll give you a real world example from Clio. We partner a lot with our onboarding team and our entire customer life cycle to look at risk and to look at how we can use certain triggers to predict that churn risk. And so a segment that we're routinely looking at is we're multi-product. So customers on specific products that purchase, that complete onboarding, that churn within a 90 to 120 day period. So it gives us a very narrow focus to hone in on as we continue to build new programs and new outreach. The second one is this is related to your segment, but making sure it's trigger-based intervention. So what is that one thing that is a trend across these customers that okay, this is a trigger to let us know it's time to intervene. The third is digital led. So thinking, how do we build within this? Again, that kind of automated piece. Are there, email sequences, in-app messaging we can provide? Is it a one-to-many scenario where customers just aren't guided to the right self-help resources, or we don't have enough self-serve available for them? So kind of look at that digital landscape and pick what can we do in a short amount of time to help serve this particular segment. And then you layer that on your fourth one with your proactive human outreach. So if you have this digital led motion, when should your scaled team intervene? What is the trigger that lets them know it's the right time? Or how do you direct your customers to the AMs or the scaled CS reps at the right moment within that journey? And then fifth and finally, most important, and sorry, this is so long, but your outcome. So I think again, starting with your segment and that business problem that is meaningful, what's the solution? What is the outcome you're trying to drive? And this is where I would encourage everyone when you're thinking about building a scaled motion or even deciding if it's right and it's, time is that outcome truly meaningful to your business? Does your board of directors care about this outcome? Does your executive team care about this outcome? And get really make that your North Star so that your entire team rallies around it. And that also makes it easier to pull in, other resources, other stakeholder and business unit groups. But those are the questions to ask, right? And you just kind of go through those motions. And I think if you have clear answers to all of those, or at least an idea or a vision, then yeah, it's the right time. It's start your pilot, get it going.
I love that. Hey, we'll send those 5 things out. So for those of you that might have been trying to furiously take notes, we'll send that as part of the follow-up because that was amazing, Courtney. You said so many things there that I loved, but I like this idea of define your outcome. What are you trying to drive? And I think that links in really nicely with this idea of don't just worry about what everybody else is doing in scaled CS. Let's not just rinse and repeat what somebody else's version of great scaled CS looks like. Let's figure out what's the outcome that we're trying to drive and the customers that we're trying to drive here for this organization, and then build it around that. So I loved that. I also really like your concept of try it, test it, pilot it, let's see and let's go. And I think we might dig into that a little bit more as we go through. And also this concept of triggers that you talked about, okay, so when you're running your scaled motion, what's the trigger for when you need to actually escalate it to a human CSM? This is so important these days because that's going to come up more and more with automations, with agents. How do you tell an agent when it's time to escalate to a CSM? And so love that. And I think no matter what stage anybody on here is in with their scaled CS journey, figuring out your triggers is only going to help you as you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, so let's say we figured out it's the right time. We definitely want to start to work on our scaled CS motion. How do we start to figure out what the right move is here to run that? Are we asking for hey, finance, I need more
Mhm.
headcount because I need to apply some people to this scaled segment? Are we trying to figure out, oh, should I reallocate some resource from my higher touch accounts to actually help man some of the escalations from this scaled segment? Am I not applying humans to it at all? Am I doing everything through tech? Like, how do you figure out which one to go for and then where to start to go and ask for that investment?
Yeah, absolutely. This is just personal experience in my time doing this. I would generally asking head count, I would usually leave that as the final goal and the final step after you've tried reallocating resources and you've looked at your tech and how you can work within that. And that advice is based on just experience of what I've been, told in the past in terms of like going to ask for resources and having the feedback be, well, have we tried these things, right? So I think you're always going to get that sort of push and pull
Yep.
from the business of like, well, is there a need for headcount? And so I would think of that as like as you're sort of building this pilot or this journey, like that's your ultimate goal, right? But first you have to prove the value. And so I would think, look at your landscape, your tool. If you have the capability to run digital motions, start there, invest there. Once you figured out what your segment is, what is capable within the tools that you have in that stack, and start to like build around a plan. Okay, how can I try something new? How can I test? And maybe even if you have the ability to partner closely with other departments like marketing or customer education, how do you bring them into the fold to help drive that digital-led engagement? And then as a tag on to that, because I don't necessarily think that digital like learning how or thinking about how you invest in your tech stack and reallocating resources I don't necessarily think that those should be exclusive to each other. I think you should think about this and how do I combine those so that I have the most amount of influence possible. And then take a look at your team and say, okay, where can I potentially, you know, allocate a resource? And keep in mind, it can be one person. Most of the scale pilots that I've run have started with one AM. And just kind of showing the value that one person can have in this sort of entire ecosystem can be really valuable at helping you tag on to like, okay, I actually do need more resources here. So I would think of it that way. So look at your team. Who can you free up? How can you move around customers or their focus so that you can target your segment? And again, going back to the segment first approach, this is why this is so important is because if your segment is 2,000 customers and you have only one resource that you can allocate and you have limited digital motions, you're not going to have much of an impact, right?
Mm,
So that's where narrowing it down to something, 400 customers every quarter or something like that with a real problem that the business cares about that you can start to show because you're not trying to solve it entirely in this first pilot. You're trying to show that if we continue to iterate and build on this, then we're going to have a meaningful, scalable success long term for the business. So
yeah.
that's why that segment is so important. Is it's really narrowing down so that you can be hyper focused in your efforts if you are limited in what your resources allow for you.
Yeah, nice. That's such good advice because I know what I'm like. I'm definitely like a try and solve the whole problem kind of gal.
Boil
So
the ocean.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think
Yeah.
that's really good advice. Like figure out your segment, start there. And it sounds like your advice is try and prove out some value with the resource you have.
Yeah.
Like figure out
Yeah.
what tech capabilities you've got. I mean, even if you're listening and you don't have a ton of tech, you'd be surprised what you can do just by downloading stuff into a spreadsheet and uploading it into an execution tool. There's work
Yeah.
to be done as a first pilot and a first test case.
Yeah, and I would add on the tech piece too. Again, like don't ignore your business units. Don't ignore marketing or customer education or
Mm,
whatever units you have or stakeholders you have to help drive this. Because again, if your segment is really a business problem that is meaningful, and you bring them in and you're like, hey, this is my idea, these are the goals, this is the revenue I want to impact. It would be great if marketing could tag into this and also achieve their goals of
mm,
increasing that revenue through expansions or churn or whatever their, business objectives might be.
yeah.
And partnering to be like, we could do this together digitally.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to start to build those relationships because that is also very important in scaled as well. It's very much a hub and spoke type, you know, team, right? You really need the influence and the support of your other departments to make it successful.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's say we've run a pilot or a test with a small subset of customers using the tech, the people that we have, and we realize that we want to go bigger. You need to go
Mhm.
ask for budget, whether that be for a tool or a resource or a headcount, whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
When you do go ask for the budget, what kinds of things are you talking about? What kinds of things are you building into that request?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, and this is the trickier one to usually prove around, is revenue impact. So I think this is, when you're thinking about your outcomes, figure out, even if it's in the scrappiest way possible, how do I tie engagements and efforts to net revenue retention, whether it's through churn reduction or it's through expansion? So again, depending on where your focus lies as a team, some, like for example, our team, we have a very high retention focus, but my team is also responsible for CSQLs as well. So that expansion dollar piece is also very important as we start to build scaled interventions. So that's the first line is do you have a way to meaningfully report and report that back to the business as you're running this pilot? And so this is also too where again partnerships might come into play. This is having RevOps help you build that reporting or build that inside analysis. If you don't have that kind of team support, I would, leverage spreadsheets and AI, think of how you can measure this. Because I think if you're looking at a revenue goal, think of how you can measure it as you're setting this up of this is where our customers start. This is what we did in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, et cetera. So you have those like markers along the way to show that revenue impact. And again, you might have to do this I've done it through spreadsheets before.
Yeah.
So it is possible, I promise. But it's getting very specific into the outcomes that you're trying to drive. The second one is it's focusing on product adoption. So if I'm going to leadership to ask for, headcount and resources, I can drive more product adoption. I tie revenue and product adoption back to capacity, right?
Mm,
So it's if I have X more resources, I can drive this many more engagements that then produce this much additional revenue or this churn impact. And we're also driving this amount of product adoption. Again, product adoption is a one. I know that I'm very lucky at Clio. We have product adoption scores. This might be something that you build through a tool if you have a health score capability there. If you don't, I wouldn't say don't worry about it. It's not absolutely needed as long as you can, again, tie it back to revenue. You can always substitute in engagement and touch metrics like reach, one-on-one,
mm.
email engagement, one-to-many engagement as a way to show influence, but North Star needs to be that revenue impact.
Yeah,
And that
nice.
just that flows into then capacity. So then we take a look at how this scales across. So you started with one small segment. How does that compound over time? What does that entire, a book of business look like over a year? And then you map that back to your headcount and to your capacity needs.
Yeah, nice. And I think the important thing to your point around the product usage is you need some kind of way of measuring a leading indicator because
Exactly.
otherwise we're all waiting 12 months to prove out the value
Yeah.
of our test case, right? Because we're waiting for revenue target. So having some kind of leading indicator, I think, is super important.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so and I guess by the way, this all comes back to your idea of like run it on a sample set, a subset, because then it just makes pulling all of that data and figuring out that value much easier for you to do, right?
It does, especially that's a great call out on like leading indicators. If we all know churn is lagging, right? So it is harder. The more you expand it out and you involve more
Mm,
customers, the bigger your segment, the harder that is to track.
yeah.
So really like pinpointing into that focus. But I fall back on revenue so much is because at the end of the day, it's truly the one thing that like drives all of our teams, right?
Yeah.
Renewals, retention, expansion, that's going to be the key to really proving out that you're having a meaningful impact.
Yeah, nice. You talked a couple of times now about working with other teams. So you've
Mhm.
mentioned a little bit about education, marketing, RevOps. Maybe can you give us a little bit more detail there? What are the different stakeholders internally that you're partnering with or you're bringing along the journey and how you're working with them?
Yeah. We have quite a great, I mean, I have such a great stakeholder group here at Clio, but have been really successful in other companies too, just having that support hub around scaled success. I think depending on how your company or your team is, teams are made up, definitely want to, I think I would start with your partnership. It's funny too, because I was thinking about this question last night, and my answer has changed in the last 2 years of where I would like what teams I would focus on to start with. But I would say definitely start your conversations and your relationship building with your data team, your business intelligence team, and your RevOps team. And again, that goes back to your outcome tracking, right? To show value, you need to have some sort of support to help build that. And I have at Clio, we have a great relationship with those teams, and those teams have, partnered with us to not only deliver reporting and like outcome tracking, but they're also, delivering our data sets as well, our risk triggers, our health scores, how we're like identifying when a customer's ready for expansion versus not. So that data team, that business insights team is really key to help you think through your segments, how you're going to influence them, like where those interventions are, those triggers are, and then also just showing, uh, this is like it kind of by helping you identify what that business problem is. This is where we're seeing the most churn or the most like lagging adoption, et cetera. And then I would say also too, again, going back to once you have that sort of, data outcome piece relationship defined, it's about make sure you're tightly woven in with your marketing team, product marketing, life cycle marketing, however it's split up. But those are going to be that's going to be the team to help you deliver, uh, you know, digital-led messages, especially if you don't have the tooling to do it yourself. So product marketing for like in-app, marketing for your lifecycle emails, one-to-many webinars. And then if you have a customer education team, same thing there. Really lock and step in what does that education look like for adoption? If you're trying to drive retention, how do you bring them into the fold to, line up what they're doing so that it influences the same type of metrics? So again, just kind of, real world examples. We partner a lot with our education team on things like certification, our one-to-many offerings. And then it's all tied around the classes that we offer. It's all tied around driving a particular adoption score. And then that way we're all sort of focused on the same thing. And then we're all tracking towards the same outcomes. And then of course there's, your other teams like support or engineering, all equally important as you're like collecting feedback, you're thinking about touch points, product use cases, whatever it might be, to like make sure that, you have that sort of full circle of the business. But those would be
Nice.
that would be that's your sphere. That's my recommendation for who to talk to and who to build relationships with.
I love it. The one thing I would add to that around customer marketing, and hopefully marketing don't hate on me for this. I also now run marketing. So bear
Yeah,
that in mind with my feedback. But I think sometimes when you're partnering up with customer marketing, the messaging that you're then driving through your like scaled or digital plays can feel quite marketing heavy. And
exactly.
so I think it's great to get them to give you some baseline content, but to also just apply your own CSM brain to it and think about, does that feel like a human reaching out to me? And does that feel like a one-to-one
Yeah,
conversation versus more sales messaging? So
yeah.
maybe just one call out there for folks who are thinking of starting that.
100%. I would add to that too. We partner with marketing to understand where we send messaging where they don't. So it's
Yeah.
also that partnership of how do you layer in so that it does feel more human, it feels more CS driven. But then we're also filling gaps where marketing's not addressing, and then it becomes more of a combined effort versus a siloed approach where
Yeah.
customers are getting mixed messages based on, whatever communication is being sent to them.
Yeah, nice. Okay, we're going to move to some questions from folks who are listening in a second. I think the big thing that I'm taking away from this is figure out the most sensible subset of customers and give it a go, trial it. oftentimes I would say to my teams, there's a lot of these customers who haven't been hearing from us at all, or who've been barely
Yeah.
hearing from us. And so, like, don't worry, like, we're going to add value. We almost can't do any wrong here. But interestingly, there are some companies out there who maybe have a CSM applied to every single customer. And so the
Yeah.
experience for the customer is about to change. And so Russ has asked a really good question, which is, how do you manage the transition for your current customers who've been really
Mm.
comfortable having a managed CSM, but maybe now they fit into your like digital CS spend threshold? Do you have any advice there, Courtney? And then maybe I'll add on to that.
Yeah, that's oh gosh, that's a good one. And that one is tough. So I think the way that I've approached it in the past is being really transparent with customers on the services that they'll receive in moving from CSM to sort of this like scaled version.
Yeah.
Um, trying to like amp up the value as much as you can through one-to-many, partnering with support. But really just trying to find like really kind of focusing your messaging around we're not abandoning you, we're just moving to a new service model. And being really transparent about that what that service model is and what it entails. But then having an escalation path back to a CSM if it escalates to that point, or if you need those sort of like interventions to help kind of bridge a gap. The other thing you can think about, this is one thing that I tried at a company one time where when we first moved to some of our customers to a scaled motion, we did this because a lot of these customers too, I think you have to look at the engagement levels. You're obviously going to have some that are more engaged versus not. For the ones that are more engaged, you might try like a timed ownership approach and sort of phase them off. So I've run in the past engagements that we called them like optimization plays, where we reached out to customers that actually we hadn't really been all that active for a while. And we said, hey, we're going to give you sort of a timed CSM for a little bit and sort of got them like up and running and just kind of set the stage that this was temporary. You might try something similar with customers that you're moving that have been heavily engaged with the CSM. Like, hey, we're gonna roll you off naturally. Like, we're gonna like kind of phase this out. We'll work with you on a like limited schedule, and then once we get you to a place, because honestly, it's really about getting them to a place where they're optimized, where they can run on their own. That's always the goal for customers, and just kind of present it that way and say like we still have an escalation path back, but we're going to kind of make you a little bit more autonomous and then put you into this self-serve motion where it's easier for you to get access. And you don't have to wait to book a call with us. So think about your framing and then maybe try something timed or, yeah, more of a kind of slow, natural roll off.
Yeah, I love that. Such good feedback. Okay, one last quick question from Chloe. Chloe saying they've already got their motion segmented by ARR. It sounds like they're quite early in their scaled
Mhm.
launch. How would you then manage segmentation if you've already got it done by
Yeah.
ARR? Is it a case of finding a smaller subset within that ARR? Like, how would you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So again, insight into just real world. Our segment is technically everything that's not owned by a CSM. So it is a huge swath of customers. We cannot reach out to all of those customers and impact them even digitally. And so we were pretty lucky and we worked with our data intelligence team to build us a churn risk trigger. So we have an automated trigger telling us when customers have a propensity to churn in certain products and those intervene into our program. So it narrowed our focus down quite a bit. So
Hmm.
it's what's your segment within your segment or segments, and then figure out, and they can look different. We've been running mostly on churn risk triggers, but now we're looking at expansion and optimization triggers. So I
Nice.
think that's
Yeah.
the other thing about scaled. And this is where your outcomes come into play and thinking about the full revenue picture. It is about churn risk, yes, but sometimes it's about growth. And
Yeah.
again, kind of going back to like easing customers back off, when they've been fully engaged. Like your program can also be about optimization and getting customers into that higher space around product adoption. So, this is all to say be creative. It doesn't have to all be one certain thing, but you're gonna need segments within your segments. Yes.
Love that. Thank you. Courtney, you've been amazing. Thank you so much. So much good advice for those who are thinking about starting out and building a scaled segment. For those of you listening, we'll share the recording. We will share Courtney's 5-point framework as well. Thank you so much for joining. Please look out for the next monthly sync. We'll include that as part of the follow-up. And Courtney, massive thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Cool.
me.
Thanks so much, everybody. See you later.